Welcome to The Explainer. I am literally so excited to have you here today because we're going to unpack something that affects, well, almost every single one of us. We're looking at the invisible forces that completely hijack our romantic relationships, even when deep, genuine love is actually present. If you've ever felt like your relationship was suddenly taken over by some force you just couldn't control, this is absolutely for you. We're going to decode the hidden mechanisms operating right beneath the surface of your love life, using some truly fascinating insights from relationship experts.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do couples get stuck in the exact same painful conflicts over and over again? You probably know the drill, right? The argument kicks off about something completely random. Maybe it's the dishes, or a weird text message, or just a tone of voice. But within minutes, you're both acting out the exact same script. It feels like hitting a brick wall. And despite all the love you have for each other and all those promises to do better next time, the cycle just repeats. So, what's actually going on here?
Section 3. The Invisible Relationship Saboteur. Let's see what happens when deep-seated survival mechanisms decide to take the wheel. The source materials we're looking at today point out something really profound. These recurring roadblocks aren't just a matter of bad communication. I mean, we love to blame our communication skills, don't we? We think, oh, if we just use I statements, everything's going to be magically fixed. Actually, scratch that. What we're really dealing with is an invisible relationship saboteur. When tension rises, your logical brain shuts down, and this older, highly protective part of your nervous system steps in to save you from emotional danger. And what makes these survival mechanisms so unbelievably tricky is that they hide in plain sight. Childhood trauma responses are often cleverly disguised as adult personality traits. Like, you might think you're just a sensitive person, but in reality, your nervous system is constantly scanning the room for any hint of rejection. Or maybe you pride yourself on being super rational, but this is actually your system's way of shutting down and detaching under emotional pressure. Maybe you're known as the strong, independent one, which is often just a learned defense mechanism because you were taught early on you couldn't rely on anyone. Or you're the endlessly caring partner, unconsciously overgiving to earn the love you feel you don't inherently deserve. It holds quite a mirror up to us, doesn't it? Now, what's really interesting about this next section, the mother and father wound, is seeing exactly where these specific survival mechanisms come from. To understand that, the experts tell us we have to look all the way back to our earliest attachments. Let's define exactly what this means, because I know the terminology can sound a bit intense. The mother and father wound is the lingering effect of emotional unsafety, unpredictability, or absence in your early foundation. One of our sources brilliantly describes this as the emotional marinade of your childhood. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that exploring this is not about assigning guilt or pointing fingers at your parents. For sure, your parents likely did the absolute best they could with the tools they had. Rather, this is just an objective look at your early emotional environment. It could simply be that a parent was physically present but emotionally unavailable, or maybe their love just felt conditional. See, when an infant or a young child is in an environment where a parent is emotionally unavailable, overly controlling, or just unpredictable, they can't logic their way out of it. The child draws conclusions, not in words, but in strategies. To survive the emotional discomfort, the child unconsciously develops coping mechanisms. If crying gets you ignored, well, you learn to be quiet and strong. If your parent is super anxious, you might learn to be overly caring just to soothe them. These childhood survival strategies, they were brilliant life-saving adaptations at the time, but they become the exact behaviors that completely sabotage our adult love lives. Which brings us to symbiosis versus autonomy. To really see how this plays out, we have to look at two core developmental needs we have as kids. Our ability to navigate romantic relationships as adults completely depends on how well we experienced these two forces growing up, drawing heavily here from the psychological insights of author Hannah Cuppen. An ideal, perfectly balanced childhood attachment requires two things. First, you have healthy symbiosis. This is that safe, warm connection with a caregiver. Their emotional availability lets you land deeply within yourself, building this solid bedrock of self-love. You just feel fundamentally secure. Then you have healthy autonomy. Because you feel so completely safe, you naturally want to go out and explore. You feel supported to go out into the world, play, and discover, with a deep, unshakable trust that the bond with your caregiver remains intact even when you're apart. You can leave, you can come back, and the love is always there. But what happens when that ideal balance is disrupted? We get two really unhealthy extremes. Unhealthy symbiosis is when a child becomes overly enmeshed with a parent. The kid might actually have to emotionally care for the mother or father, entirely losing their own identity and boundaries in the process. Their individuality just gets swallowed up. On the flip side, Unhealthy autonomy is essentially forced independence. If a parent is suffocating, controlling, or emotionally volatile, the child disconnects internally just to protect themselves. They learn to break the connection way too early, because staying connected feels overwhelming or unsafe.
Section 11, fear of abandonment and fear of commitment. So, why does all this childhood psychology matter to you right now?
Because these childhood imbalances directly manifest as the two most common and, frankly, most painful relationship fears in adulthood. We basically take the template of our first love, our parents, and project it right onto our romantic partners. If you suffered from unhealthy symbiosis as a child, you likely develop a massive fear of abandonment as an adult. You become the partner who clings, who overgives, who constantly seeks reassurance and validation because your system is quite literally terrified the other person is going to leave. But if you were forced into unhealthy autonomy, you develop a fear of commitment. You become the distant partner. You fiercely guard your personal space. You feel completely suffocated the moment someone gets a bit too close, and you habitually create emotional or physical distance just to feel safe. One clings out of panic, the other flees out of panic. And this brings us to a pretty agonizing realization. Hannah Cuppen summarizes this so perfectly. We either lose the other or we lose ourselves. Think about it. If you have the fear of abandonment, you will completely sacrifice your own needs and boundaries, losing yourself just to keep your partner around. But if you have the fear of commitment, you're going to put up these massive walls to protect your autonomy, ultimately losing the other person in the process. It's a heartbreaking trap where authentic, relaxed love just feels impossible to maintain. And this brilliantly illustrates the totally toxic dance that happens when these two styles get together, which, irony of ironies, they almost always do. It's like magnets. The anxious partner is unconsciously seeking the ideal mother or father they never had, pushing constantly for intimacy. But boom, this very push triggers the avoidant partner's survival mechanism. The avoidant partner feels their territory is being completely invaded, so they pull away and shut down. And what's the result of this dynamic? Immense frustration, total misunderstanding, pure exhaustion, and a deep aching loneliness for both people, despite them sitting right there in the exact same room.
Let's move to breaking patterns and healing and see how recognizing this dance is the absolute first step to changing the music.
The good news? You are absolutely not doomed to repeat these cycles forever. Our sources strongly emphasize that healing is entirely possible. It's really a process of restoring trust and creating space for real, unconditional love. Healing means balancing the scales. It means integrating both the masculine energy of healthy autonomy and boundaries and the feminine energy of healthy, open-hearted connection right within yourself. It's all about learning that you can be completely yourself, the whole shebang, while also being deeply connected to someone else.
So how do we actually get there? Step 1, you have got to recognize the hidden patterns. The next time you're triggered, just pause for a second and ask yourself, wait, is this adult me reacting right now or my childhood survival strategy? Step 2, look at your shadow sides with radical acceptance. We all have messy, needy, or cold parts of ourselves. Stop judging them, understand they were formed to protect you. And step 3, open up to uncomfortable vulnerability. True intimacy requires stepping way out of your safe, habitual patterns and daring to show your partner what is really going on underneath all that anger or distance.
Which leaves us with this final, honestly, pretty provocative thought. Do you dare to look your shadow sides right in the eyes? Breaking these generational cycles of the mother and father wound takes immense courage. It requires looking at the parts of yourself you have tried so hard to hide away. But as we've seen today, doing that brave inner work is literally the master key to unlocking the healthy, lasting, and deeply fulfilling love you actually deserve. Take this question with you today, reflect on your own patterns, and remember that awareness is the absolute beginning of all transformation. Thanks for learning with me today.